5 hours 41 minutes and 22 seconds, Moscow. A gray service corridor off Khoroshevskoy Highway, where government sedans glide like metronomes and CCTV lenses never blink. A man steps out of a dark vehicle with the posture of someone who has never waited in line. 2 seconds of exposure. A short, controlled burst from close range. Then silence, broken only by the hard slap of shoes retreating across wet pavement. They believed the perimeter was mathematics. Layers, gates, badges, routes, schedules. They had no idea the equation had already been solved from inside, because this wasn't an ambush aimed at a random officer. This was a shot at a node in the nervous system, Deputy Chief of Russian Military Intelligence. A man whose job is to make other people disappear without ever appearing himself. And in a state built on fear discipline, a public hit like this isn't only violence. It's an operational message. No warning, no radio contact, no second chances. Now the fallout begins. He wasn't a celebrity. He was infrastructure. Inside Russian military intelligence, GRU, the deputy chief is not a second-in-command in the casual sense. He is a throughput machine, coordinating directorates, approving clandestine tasking, adjudicating what is rumor and what is actionable, deciding which sources live and which sources get burned for tempo. Think of him as a control valve in a high-pressure system. Small movement, massive downstream effect. His day is calibrated like a flight plan. Route options, vehicle swaps, time windows measured in minutes. Security details run on checklists, not intuition. The sedans are armored to standard that stops pistol rounds and fragments, built with laminated ballistic glass thick enough to distort reflections. The comm suite is encrypted. The convoy spacing is deliberate, close enough to deny vehicle insertion, far enough to avoid a single IED taking all assets at once. And the man himself is a platform. Not in steel and engines, but in authority. He can trigger arrests with a call. He can push a covert procurement line through 3 ministries in 48 hours. He can silence internal dissent by simply shifting postings. In an intelligence service, the weapon isn't the gun. It's permission. His protection isn't just body armor and a sidearm. It's the assumption that the system is intact, that the dome holds. The scale of that protection can be measured. A dedicated detail, typically 4 to 8 close protection agents rotating shifts, weapons carried concealed but ready. 9 by 19 pistols, compact carbines in the vehicle, medical kits with tourniquets and hemostatic gauze. A second ring, facility security with access control and ID verification. A third ring, electronic surveillance, camera coverage, motion sensors, license plate recognition, and the quiet integration of mobile network monitoring. It's overwhelming on paper, but paper doesn't stop a bullet at 5 meters. To understand why an adversary would try this, you have to understand the condition of the battlefield they're really fighting on. Not trenches, not artillery grids, narrative space, internal confidence, chain of command cohesion. When state leans heavily on intelligence services to maintain control, internally and externally, those services become both shield and Achilles tendon. Attack the intelligence apparatus, and you don't just remove a person. You inject doubt into every other person who relies on that apparatus. Suddenly, every deputy, every colonel, every liaison officer starts asking the same question in private. If they can hit him, can they hit me? Motive in this environment doesn't need to be ideological. It can be strategic intimidation. It can be retaliation. It can be a deliberate attempt to force the system into overreaction, mass arrests, purges, paranoia that eats performance. And sometimes it's a test, a calibration shot. The plan is like trying to climb a polished wall with no grip, except the wall is guarded, monitored, and the climber is being watched by people who specialize in watching. It's an impossible challenge, unless the wall has a crack you didn't know existed. Modern protective security is not a single wall. It's a layered network, and it works when every layer feeds the next with clean, fast information. Sensors, processing, decisions, action. That's the kill chain, except flipped inward for defense. Start with sensors. Cameras are the obvious ones, but the real early warning comes from pattern analysis. License plates that don't belong. Phones that move in synchronized ways. Vehicles that loop. People who appear, vanish, and reappear at the same corner. Even in a city the size of Moscow, routine is detectable. Then the platforms. Patrol units. Plainclothes surveillance teams. Rapid response vehicles staged within minutes. Security at the building. Close protection around the principal. Then weapons. Not just guns. barriers, control doors, lockdowns, electronic access denial. The weapon is often a decision, executed quickly. This is where the phrase matters. No panic, just process. Because when you protect a high-value target, emotion is an enemy. You don't improvise. You run the checklist. You escalate by protocol. You assume deception. But protocols have one weakness. They assume the input is honest. At 5 hours 40 minutes and 10 seconds, the first failure is invisible. A small absence. A camera that should have been returning clean frames returns a smooth, looping clip from 10 minutes earlier. The guard sees movement, but it's the wrong movement. It's yesterday's ghost. At 5 hours 40 minutes and 58 seconds, a vehicle with legitimate clearance enters the zone. Correct plate, correct transponder, correct driver posture. Everything matches the baseline. The system breathes out. At 5 hours 41 minutes and 22 seconds, the principal exits. The close protection agent on the left steps half a pace forward, scanning hands, shoulders, eyes, classic, threat cues. Another agent checks a street line for any vehicle slowing too hard, too near. Their attention is wide, professional. And that's the trap. Because the attacker isn't coming from the street line. He's already inside the bubble. 5 hours 41 minutes and 24 seconds, two figures converge, not running, walking with purpose. The first is a decoy, a body that absorbs attention. The second is the shooter, angle tight, weapon low, hidden in the geometry of coat and arm. At that distance, ballistics becomes certainty. A 9x19 round at close range doesn't need velocity to be lethal. It needs placement. A suppressed weapon doesn't sound like movies. It's not silence. It's a hard mechanical cough, a punch of gas managed by baffles. In an urban corridor, it blends into the hum of tires, distant construction, HVAC. To the untrained ear, it's confusion. To the trained ear, it's an execution. 5 hours 41 minutes and 26 seconds, the first rounds land. The deputy chief collapses fast, not dramatics, just physics. Blood pressure drops. Muscles lose tension. The body becomes weight. The close protection agent reacts in fractions. Hands move before thought. One agent pushes toward the principal, trying to shield and drag. Another draws, scanning for muzzle flash that isn't there because the shooter is already stepping away. A third agent shouts the code word short-clipped, while the radio transmits a burst of encrypted panic that tries not to sound like panic. No warning, no radio contact, no second chances. 5 hours 41 minutes and 40 seconds. The attacker is gone into a gap that's security designed for convenience, an entrance, a service passage, a side stairwell. The same pathways used for logistics, for cleaners, for deliveries. The same blind spots that always exist because buildings must function. Here's what makes this fascinating. The shot itself is the least important part. The real operation is the extraction, because anyone can fire a gun. Not everyone can walk out of a controlled zone after firing it. 5 hours 42 minutes and 10 seconds. The first ring locks down. Gates close. Guards push vehicles into static positions. Doors are held. IDs checked aggressively. But in a modern city, locking down a zone is like trying to hold water with your hands. People move. Vehicles move. Metro entrances swallow crowds. There are too many exits to seal cleanly, too many legitimate reasons to be somewhere. 5 hours 43 minutes and 2 seconds. Second ring activates. Traffic cameras pull frames. License plate recognition flags anomalies. A rapid response unit is dispatched to likely escape routes, bridges, arterial roads, choke points where geometry beats horsepower. The shooter doesn't need to outrun police. He only needs to be unremarkable for 6 minutes. 5 hours 44 minutes and 30 seconds. Medical response collides with security response. This is the first thin line moment, the intersection where one mistake can trigger catastrophe. If the principal is alive, every second matters. Tourniquet, pressure dressing, airway, evacuation. But security wants the scene sterile to prevent a secondary attack, a follow-on blast, a second shooter. These are competing priorities: save the man or control the space. The wrong decision costs either a life or an entire team. The agents choose discipline. They drag the principal behind hard cover, concrete, engine block, structural column. Someone applies pressure. Someone checks breathing. Someone watches the approach angles with weapon up, because at this moment the most dangerous threat isn't the shooter who already left. It's the shooter's partner you haven't seen yet. 5 hours and 46 minutes, the city begins to shift. Checkpoints appear like sudden scar tissue. Patrols slow traffic. Radios fill with short, clipped exchanges. Every unit is told the same thing without saying it directly. This is priority one, and failure is not an option. Let's talk about the system that makes this possible, because understanding it is essential. Modern urban manhunt integration. You're dealing with layered sensor fusion. Street cameras tied to regional command nodes. Automatic license plate recognition systems that don't just read numbers, they correlate time and direction, building likely route trees. Cellular network metadata that identifies devices moving in unusual patterns, fast relocation, power-offs, SIM swaps. Payment systems, transit gates, building access logs. It's not one camera catching one face. It's 1,000 small breadcrumbs being forced into a single narrative. 5 hours, 49 minutes, and 18 seconds. The first suspect description hits the network. Male, medium build, dark outerwear, calm movement. Not enough. Too generic. Moscow has 1 million men who fit that description. The search doesn't narrow. So the system does what systems do. It escalates the net. 5 hours, 52 minutes, and 40 seconds. Metro stations near the incident begin selective checks. Not full shutdown, too visible, too disruptive, but enough to signal power. Enough to create friction. 5 hours, 58 minutes, and 5 seconds. Intersections get heavier. Vehicles are stopped. Trunks checked. IDs scanned. The city's pulse slows. And now the second-order effects begin, because this is not only a security operation, it is an internal power event. When a deputy intelligence chief is hit, the first response isn't just police. It's counterintelligence. 6 hours, 3 minutes, and 30 seconds. Internal units begin securing communications records of people who had proximity to the target's schedule, who knew the route, who knew the time, who had access to the building's security feeds. Because the most terrifying implication is not that an enemy penetrated the city. It's that someone inside opened the door. 6 hours and 12 minutes. The narrative bifurcates. One story is for the public. Isolated incident. Investigation underway. Stability intact. The other story is for the apparatus. Find the leak. Find the network. Crush it fast. At 6 hours, 18 minutes, and 45 seconds, the most dangerous moment came, not from a gunshot, but from a question asked in the wrong office. Who cleared the vehicle? Because that question is a grenade. Pull the pin, and it detonates trust across the entire chain. Suddenly, every clearance is suspect. Every guard is vulnerable. Every access log is a potential death sentence. So the system reacts the way authoritarian security systems always react. It overcorrects. 6 hours, 25 minutes, and 10 seconds. Immediate procedural changes. Route randomization increases. Motorcades become less predictable. Some principals switch to underground entrances. Others stop moving entirely. Meetings go remote or canceled. The intelligence machine slows down not because it is broken, but because it is afraid. And fear is friction. 6 hours and 36 minutes. A separate team begins the forensic timeline reconstruction. They aren't chasing a man. They're chasing math. Exact frame counts. Camera angles. Footfall cadence. Audio signature. Muzzle gas residue. Cartridge cases, if any. If the weapon was suppressed and the shooter practiced, he may have used a brass catcher or retrieved casings. If it was a revolver, rare but possible, there are no casings at all. If it was a pistol and the shooter left brass, each casing is a fingerprint in metal. Even the angle of entry matters. A bullet path is a line. Lines point back to positions. Positions point to blind spots. Blind spots point to planning. 6 hours, 44 minutes, and 20 seconds. Another escalation beat. Communications tightening. Phones of personnel in the immediate orbit are flagged. Network access is monitored aggressively. Any unusual login, any file copy, any call to an unrecognized number becomes suspect. The state's reflex is to treat the event as both assassination and breach, because that's what it is. 7 hours and 5 minutes. The public sees only fragments. A vague statement, maybe a rumor, maybe shaky footage from a distant phone. But behind the curtain, the apparatus has already done its most important calculation. What did the attacker learn? The shooter learned the schedule. The shooter learned the corridor. The shooter learned the camera posture. The shooter learned response time. How many seconds until the first weapon is drawn? How long until the gates close? How quickly the second ring activates? That is intelligence harvested through violence. And intelligence is worth more than the target sometimes. At 7 hours, 22 minutes and 30 seconds, internal security begins its own counter-operation. It's not about the shooter anymore. It's about preventing the aftermath from spreading. That means arrests, interviews, polygraphs if needed, quiet disappearances if necessary. No warning, no radio contact, no second chances. 8 hours and 10 minutes. The deputy chief's condition, whether alive or dead, becomes a state secret in the short term because disclosure changes the temperature. If he survives, the system claims resilience. If he dies, the system must project control. Either way, the truth is operationally inconvenient. And that is the irony of modern power. It is obsessed with image, but trapped by physics. Blood loss doesn't care about propaganda. In the climax, the decisive moment is not cinematic in the Hollywood sense. It's clinical. A hallway filled with the metallic smell of blood and cleaning chemicals. The low murmur of radios. The harsh white of fluorescent light reflecting off polished floors. A medevac vehicle idling with a vibration you feel in your teeth. Boots sliding slightly because someone tracked rainwater in, and no one had time to mop. The principle is moved. Not carried like a hero, but handled like fragile cargo. A human asset with a failing system. The agent's faces are flat, their eyes scanning, because grief is a luxury you don't get on the clock. Outside, the city holds its breath. The attacker doesn't need to celebrate. The attacker already achieved the point. Proof of access. Devastating. Controlled. A strike that doesn't topple the state, but forces it to tighten. And tightening is a kind of slow suffocation. Now the ledger. On the attacker's side, the cost is relatively small. One suppressed handgun, anywhere from a few hundred to a few $1,000s, depending on origin. Ammunition measured in rubles, not millions. A few days of surveillance, transport, burner phones, maybe rental vehicles. The real cost is risk. The attacker spends human capital, operatives who might be lost, networks that might be exposed. But they also gain something priceless, confirmation. They confirm that a high-level protective bubble can be penetrated. They confirm how fast the response is. They confirm the pattern of escalation. They force the system to reveal itself. On the defender's side, the cost explodes immediately. Citywide security posture changes burn fuel by the ton. Vehicles idle for hours. Personnel overtime runs into millions. Every checkpoint consumes man-hours. Every forensic analysis consumes specialist labor. Every internal investigation fractures trust. And the political/intelligence cost is worse. The incident forces leadership to divert attention from external operations to internal containment. It prompts purges that remove experienced officers, sometimes the wrong ones. It slows decision cycles. It makes everyone more cautious, which in intelligence work often means less effective. So the ledger reads like this. Attacker spent, minimal material, high risk. Attacker revealed, defender's response architecture, schedule vulnerabilities. Attacker achieved, strategic intimidation and operational proof. Defender spent, massive manpower, massive time, massive attention. Defender revealed, procedural weaknesses and reaction tempo. Defender achieved, containment maybe. Deterrence uncertain. Often, the strategic result is nothing tangible. No territory gained. No battlefield shifted. But the invisible battlefield, confidence, takes a hit. And confidence is a weapon. Propaganda will try to fill the vacuum. Edited footage, selective claims, loud statements designed to drown out the quiet truth. One side will insist it was foreign terrorism. Another will whisper it was internal betrayal. Someone will inflate the competence of the attacker. Someone will exaggerate the defender's control. But reality is in the logs. Time stamps don't argue. Camera metadata doesn't care about speeches. Radio traffic records don't bend for ideology. The real battle is information. Who controls the narrative, who controls the data, and who can act faster than the other side can think. In modern operations, math beats politics. Sensors beat slogans. Process beats panic until the process is fed bad input. And that's the lesson. Deterrence isn't just missiles and parades. It's the credibility of your security system under stress. It's whether your control nodes can move without bleeding in public. It's whether your adversary believes your bubble is unbreakable and what happens when they learn it isn't. If you found this breakdown valuable, subscribe and share. More stories that never make headlines are coming.